all of a sudden you have an F-16CJ, F-16CJ, F-16DG. There was a C-130J variant called the C-130J-30, but you can't put a -30 on a military designation. So they called it a CC-130J, but now it sounds like a Canadian airplane. So it's just totally confusing. The whole system's broken down. The new bomber, the long-range strike bomber, should have been the B-3. Because we got the B-1, the B-2. New bomber should be the B-3, but they called it the B-21 for no other reason than because it's the first bomber of the 21st century.
Okay.
Ridiculous. It's all marketing.
Peter, was anything ever built and flown as a result of the Air Force Tactical High Altitude Penetrator program?
The Tactical High Altitude Penetrator program dates to the 1970s, and it would have been, I think they had a drawing of it that I saw for a manned aircraft. It would have been very small, essentially a triangular aircraft with rounded corners, and I think it had very small tail fins, a single engine that was offset from the cockpit, so it wasn't completely symmetrical. It was a neat idea for a stealthy aircraft at a time before the word stealth had really come into vogue. To the best of my knowledge, it was simply a paper study and never got into the hardware stage, but it was really kind of an indication of the shape of things to come.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What was the so-called Sneaky Pete program, and who was the prime contractor?
Now, Sneaky Pete is an interesting plane. Not much is known about it. It was apparently built by Scaled Composites and has been used for a variety of classified programs. And the only reason I know about it at all was because I saw a patch. It had the name Sneaky Pete. It was from Scaled Composites. It had a lot of interesting iconography on it. There was a picture of a pig with the number 21 and the words "world's oldest flying pig." Now, someone who apparently has flown that aircraft has described that plane only by saying, well, it was really ugly. And apparently it's still being flown today. You know, it's been around a long time, probably used for a variety of different technology demonstrations. But I have no idea really what it looks like, because nobody who flew it is talking. And I've met a few people who did, and they just smile and they won't say anything.
Okay. Peter, what about General Dynamics Model 100? Was it ever built and flown?
I don't think the General Dynamics Model 100 ever got flown. As I recall, that was, I don't remember, was that in the 80s or 90s that they had?
I think this is early on, yeah.
It was a pretty early concept. I know there were some drawings and some models, but I don't know if they ever built anything.
Mm-hmm. On the night of September 26, 1994, a mysterious incident occurred at RAF Boscombe Down, which even to this day has never been written about in American press. Exactly what happened and who was the prime contractor of the aircraft involved?
The Boscombe Down incident remains a mystery to this day. Something apparently crashed at the Royal Air Force test establishment at Boscombe Down in England. And supposedly, there was a flurry of activity that involved U.S. Air Force aircraft and possibly an unmarked civilian 737 coming to Boscombe Down to respond to this mishap. And no information really got out. Witnesses nearby saw that there was activity. Someone described it as having possibly twin tail fins, but it got covered up with a tarp, so there wasn't really a way to get a good look at it. I don't know what happened. I've never been able to find anyone who was involved or could say for sure what the aircraft was or who built it.
So a C-5 from Palmdale flew out there, picked it up, brought it back, and then is that the end of the story? Was it repaired?
I've never heard a word. I don't know whose plane it was or anything. I've heard nothing.
Really? Okay, okay. Beginning in 1984, reports started surfacing that a new Mach 5 spy plane was being built. Soon thereafter, the major news media incorrectly termed the project Aurora, which was actually turned out to be the $2 billion in budgetary procurement funding for the B-2 stealth bomber program. Was such an aircraft ever built and flown, and what was the actual code name for the aircraft?
Rumors began in the mid-1980s that there was a hypersonic, that is beyond Mach 5 replacement for the SR-71 Blackbird. And these rumors were spurred by several things. One, the SR-71 was being retired. And because it had such fabulous capabilities, it was hard to imagine that we would be willing to give that up, that we would almost certainly have to have something to replace it. You know, and at the same time, there was a budget document that had a program element number connected with the name Aurora, with a lot of money. And this program element number was listed alongside the SR-71 and other strategic programs, so it seemed a likely candidate for a Blackbird replacement. Now, as it turned out, the Aurora code name was just a bunch of money for the B-2 program. You know, but still, even if you throw out the name Aurora and that particular pot of money, you can still wonder, you know, is there a replacement for the Blackbird? And surely, if we could produce a Mach 3 plus stealthy aircraft in the 1960s, we must be able to make something, you know, 20 years down the road that's much more sophisticated, you know, that flies higher and faster. Well, the first question you want to ask is, do we need such a capability? And there are arguments for and against. For one thing, you can say that you don't need the imaging capability because you have spy satellites, and it's true. The spy satellites today produce fantastic high-resolution imagery in color, which can be sent down in basically real time to the user. But every satellite is confined to the laws of orbital mechanics. So if your enemy is tracking your satellite, they can hide their activities from it. But if you have an airplane, that can come in from any direction at any time, and if it's stealthy and fast, you know, now you've got an advantage to find out what the enemy is doing. So yes, a high-speed, high-altitude spy plane could be very useful. It could also be very expensive to operate, and that's one of the things that helped kill the SR-71. It took a long time and a lot of money and manpower to get those flights off. And even if you put in the capability to transmit the images in real time, which is possible with satellite links, it was still a pretty tough nut to sell to Congress, and you know, there was a lot of political infighting that got the Blackbird ultimately terminated. It was canceled once and retired, and then it was brought back for a while and then retired again finally by presidential veto. So now you want to look at the idea of the concept of a hypersonic spy plane. You know, is it technically feasible? And you know, the obvious answer sounds like, yes, of course it is. What are you talking about? Look at, you know, the materials technology we have now, the propulsion technology we have now, and a lot of people over the last you know, several decades have been studying hypersonics. And it's a great idea because it can give you all kinds of capabilities. You can make a high-speed spy plane, you can make a high-speed missile, whatever you want to do. And we have people who know how to do that sort of thing. The problem has been sort of a national will in the defense realm, where they will get a bee in their bonnet about how, yeah, we need hypersonics, let's make it happen. So you get a bunch of really smart guys studying it, they do wind tunnel tests, modeling, and then someone says, I don't know, this is kind of, you know, we don't really need it and it's expensive, and so it goes away. And then you get some new advocates, and they come in and they say, hey, you know, hypersonics really give us some capabilities. So they come back and you get another push toward hypersonics, and then that kind of dies. Most recently, we've had work with the HTV-2, which is a Lockheed Martin project, and Boeing's X-51 Wave Rider, both of which were demonstrating varieties of hypersonic capabilities. The HTV-2 was launched on a rocket and re-entered the atmosphere, and they got some fantastic data, except that the airplane kept shedding its skin. So about halfway through the flight, it would come apart, and eventually they canceled that, or at least put it on the shelf. X-51 was to develop an operational scramjet capability. That's a supersonic combustion ramjet. With a regular ramjet, you need to slow the air into the inlet to subsonic speeds, but with a scramjet, you can allow supersonic airflow through the inlet. And so again, you launch something on a rocket to build up the speed so you can fire up the scramjet engine and get your air-breathing capability at hypersonic speeds. Well, the talk was they wanted to have a global reconnaissance aircraft, probably a manned platform or an unmanned platform, but something that could be a global spy plane with hypersonic capability. Well, it turns out that's really expensive and complex. Now, it's much easier to develop a hypersonic weapon, so there's been more effort toward developing hypersonic missiles. The Army has looked at some projects that carry on from some of Sandia's early designs. The Sandia Winged Energetic Reentry Vehicle, or SWERV, from the 1980s is becoming the advanced high-speed missile or something like that. And the X-51, which was building up towards Mach 5 flight for a number of minutes, got canceled before they really took that too far. And there are a lot of advocates today who believe that was a huge mistake, that we're giving up a capability we should be pursuing more vigorously. So one of the leading experts in hypersonics has described it as being back to the future again and again, in that they pursue this really great idea for a futuristic capability and then drop the ball on it, and then come back to it again and drop the ball, and just, it's a roller coaster.
Mm-hmm. So do you think, Peter, anything was built in the sense of hardware during the mid-1980s?
I've heard different opinions and rumors to the effect that at least a prototype of a hypersonic, or at least very high-speed aircraft was built and flown. There have been people who say no. I work in this field of hypersonics. We never had that capability. It just didn't happen. And I've had other people who say, yeah, we had something. We flew it. There were a couple of them. And it crashed, but I don't know what's the truth. It's all in the black. So it's a rumor mill, and we just have to hope that something will come out that'll tell us one way or the other.
Okay. Documents from Lee Graham, which are part of the John Andrews collection, indicate that the actual code name for this two-stage spaceplane system is called Senior Smart. Peter, is that correct?
I'm not familiar with the Senior Smart program. There were a number of design concepts for hypersonic aerospace plane type vehicles. There was Black Horse, Black Foal, Copper Canyon was a design study. I'm not familiar with Senior Smart.
Okay. Please describe John Andrews' Testor's model SR-75 Penetrator and the XR-7 Thunderdart, and what sources did he use to design the models?
John Andrews built a lot of interesting models. I don't think they were based particularly on reality so much as rumor and speculation. He built a model of the advanced technology bomber, the B-2, before the B-2 shape was revealed, and it turns out John Andrews' design was based on logic and rumor, but it was not based on reality, whereas the actual B-2 had very sharp angles and a sawtooth trailing edge. John Andrews made a big triangle with rounded corners. He designed a model.
So you're talking about the F-117 then? Peter?
No, we're talking about the B-2 here. John Andrews also made an F-19 model,
right,
which was based on the descriptions he'd had of Have Blue. So he had an airplane that had a sort of a pyramidal angled canopy, which is what Have Blue had. He angled his tail fins inward, which is like Have Blue. But interestingly, the actual shape of the wing planform looked a lot like the early Harvey concepts, a lot more than like the Have Blue. So he might have gotten some information from someone at Lockheed about Harvey and mixed that in with the half blue information to create his F-19. He also came up with a model that he called the SR-75 Penetrator that was supposedly a hypersonic plane that could carry a smaller vehicle on top of it that he called the XR-7 Thunderdart. I frankly found his model to be ridiculous.
Okay.
His SR-75 was a huge airplane. I mean, it was big, like a couple 100 feet long. And of the two of them, that was perhaps the most realistic aerodynamic shape, but I didn't think it would be possible to build an actual aircraft like that without being found out, because you'd have to build it somewhere and fly it. And it was so big, it wasn't the sort of thing that you could, put in a C-5 and take to your secret test site.
Right.
It would have had to have flown out of the plant where it was built, which most likely would have been Palmdale. And the XR-7 Thunderdart, looked kind of like a stealth fighter in F-117 in that it had very angular faceted shape. It was supposed to be a high-speed aircraft, and yet the engines were on pods externally mounted on top of the aircraft, which in my opinion would have just burned off in high-speed flight. So
Okay.
I thought it was more his imagination of a concept and less a realistic sort of thing.
Okay. What was the propulsion system used on the SR-75, and what type fuel did it use?
I don't remember what he had in mind for his SR-75 propulsion system. I think there were a lot of rumors at the time that high-speed aircraft were being developed with hybrid propulsion systems, mixes of conventional turbojet and ramjet capability.
Mm-hmm. So, Peter, who would have been the proposed contractor for the mothership and the parasitic aircraft if this was actually built?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's even possible to say for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It looked like a Lockheed sort of idea, but then again, it was his model may have been based largely on the MD-21 concept, the M21 mothership and D-21 drone.
Mm-hmm.
Basically had that same flavor to it.
Peter, did Boeing also build a two-part horizontal trans-atmospheric launch system which features the smaller parasitic aircraft being airdropped from the belly of the mothership as highlighted in U.S. patent number 4,802,639?
I don't know if they ever built anything like that. I've heard rumors occasionally of some sort of small lifting body type vehicle that was dropped from a B-52 with rocket propulsion, but I've never seen anything to back that up.
Okay.
And again, a rumor without any kind of documentation is awfully hard to substantiate.
The August 24th, 1992 issue of Aviation Week reported that residents living near Lockheed's Burbank facility saw a large forward SR-71 looking fuselage with rounded chines being loaded into the cargo bay of a C-5 cargo aircraft in late night of January 6 and cleared to Boeing Field in Seattle. Peter, could this have been the forward section of an SR-75 aircraft?
I have no idea what that might have been. There's a lot of interesting stuff that takes place at Air Force Plant 42, and people thought they'd seen what looked like the front end of an SR-71 type aircraft or something similar. It could have been any number of things. The problem is, from a distance, and if this was at night, and even in the daytime, it's hard to really see whether this is an aircraft, a part of an aircraft. It's just tough to gauge what it might have been.
Okay. As reported in Aviation Week, August 24th, 1992, on August 5th, 1992, a United Airlines 747 Flight 934 had a sighting of an aircraft that the pilot and co-pilot described as looking like the forward section of an SR-71 without wings and resembling a lifty body configuration. Could this have been the same aircraft Burbank residents saw being loaded into the C-5?
There's no way to say for sure whether it was the same thing that was reported seen at Palmdale, but there's a lot of strange stuff out there that we haven't heard about, and so eventually you have to think someone's going to see it.
Mm-hmm. Peter, can you confirm the existence of a modified C-5 with the designation C-5C with the chipmunk cheeks? Have you heard about that, Peter?
Well, the C-5C, To the best of my knowledge, it doesn't have any real obvious external differences from a C-5B,
Okay.
but there's a lot of internal differences to carry large cargo. The C-5C was primarily a modification to carry large reconnaissance satellites for the NRO to deliver them to launch sites. And there were, I believe, 2 C-5C models built. I don't think there's any way to tell from the outside except by their tail numbers which ones they are.
Okay. The same Aviation Week article also indicated that sightings of a light-colored XB-70-like aircraft were seen over Georgia and California's Mojave Desert. According to the article, the first sighting took place during the summer of 1990. Peter, when do you think the first flight of this aircraft occurred?
There was a huge article in Aviation Week about a large XB-70-like aircraft supposedly flying over the U.S. and I remember particularly when they came out, and it was even featured on the cover of the magazine. It was a very big deal. They called this thing Blackstar, and it was supposedly this very sophisticated, high-speed, high-altitude reconnaissance platform, which allegedly had been seen by various people. But Mike Dornheim, the West Coast editor for Aviation Week at the time, was absolutely horrified by this article because it was full of rumor and junk science, and it really, he felt, embarrassed the magazine a great deal. He did not believe it ever should have been published because there simply wasn't any substance to it. But the publishers loved it. The publishers said, oh yeah, this is going to sell a lot of copies, and it did, but Mike was just totally aghast, and a number of people, including aerospace analyst Dwayne Day, have examined that article in depth and put together very, I think, informed critiques of what the article had to say and what it didn't say, most importantly, that pretty much undermines the whole rumor. I don't think that this Blackstar aircraft ever existed.
Really? So do you put any credibility on the sighting reports then from the people who said they saw this aircraft flying overhead?
I don't think the Blackstar sighting reports had sufficient credibility to be reported the way they were in AVWEEK.
Wow.
And again, I recommend looking at Dwayne Day's analysis of the Blackstar articles because he really looked into it in a way that I just didn't have the energy to do. There were certain aspects of it that that seemed pretty obvious, but he really dug into it.
So I got to ask the question, Peter. Are you questioning Bill Scott's journalistic practices, or do you think he just took these stories and put them together, or Bill's a credible guy? What do you think happened with the article?
Yeah. Bill Scott gained a reputation for writing about black projects, and there were a number of people who were particularly critical about his methods, including Phil Klass of AVWEEK and Mike Dornheim of AVWEEK, who really felt that he'd gone off the deep end and was chasing unicorns, as it were, chasing rumors without getting any substance to back up the stories. And so I'm sorry to say that I was very excited by the articles he wrote in the 1990s because there were a lot of concepts for black projects, and I was expecting that these were going, some of them at least, would pan out.
Yeah.
But once we got up to the Blackstar story, I pretty much lost all faith in any of that.